All right, everybody. That was a game. The Detroit Lions have just lost 27-13 to the Green Bay Packers in their season opener at Lambeau Field, and it was an ugly one. It was ugly on offense. It was ugly on defense. The coaching could have been a lot better as well. We're going to break it all down for you. I'm Nolan Bianchi. With me, as always, is my partner in crime, Richard Silva, and this is Bob. Oh, Woj's not here.
Oh, man.
That's all right. We'll get him next time. We tried. And, he's writing a column for the people. So this was not a good game by the Detroit Lions. I think from start to finish, the Packers scored on their opening drive. The Lions never got going offensively. Some stats that come to the top of my head. One play of 20-plus yards for one of the most explosive offenses in the entire league. 5 for 15 on third down. 2.2 yards per carry on the ground. Jared Goff was fine, I guess, if you want to talk about his completion percentage, but when it comes to actually moving the ball downfield, the offense simply did not have it. There were a lot of things that I think it can be attributed to, but what sticks out to you off the top of your head?
Just the offense and just it sounds like rudimentary to just like make it as simple as this, but how conservative it really was, like especially in the first half. And of course, they ended up having to throw the ball more in the fourth quarter because they were down by multiple possessions. But in the first half, they just lived in third and medium, and it was kind of working fine. Like they had a field goal on one drive, the other drive that ended in the interception from Goff, which was a great play by the safety. But the interception, they got all the way down to the red zone. It was a 16-play drive and a 13-play drive. But it's just really hard to live like that when it's first down, second down, third and medium. Pick up the first down and do it again and again and again. It leaves yourself really no room for error. And I think we kind of saw that in the first half where the offense had some moments. Amon-Ra St. Brown had 3 first downs in the first half. He moved the chains 3 times. Once, toe tap on the sideline. They had good moments, but it was just like it's difficult to live that way when you need to be basically perfect.
Yeah, they did not come up in, I think, high leverage situations. I think it was the biggest issue. You talked about the third down. Both sides. Then in the red zone, I think that was probably the other big takeaway from this game. Started off 0-for-3, ended up punching one in with 55 seconds left. Too little, too late. Hard to even count that towards our overall performance.
Awesome catch.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
Hey, silver lining, Isaac Tesla, unreal.
Another shovel full of coal just into the Tesla hype machine. 2 shovels full.
But his only target of the day. And you're kind of wondering, like, where was that? Like, they could use his size. They could use his, downfield ability or whatever, and just
he got red zone snaps is what he got.
Yeah,
he really didn't play between the 20 and the 20.
Yeah. So those were the things that jumped out to me. I think, talking to Dan Campbell after the game, I would say he made no bones about the fact that they need to be better. Same with Jared Goff, but he also seemed to believe that they're 1 or 2 things away from really putting together a good performance today. And I don't necessarily know if that's going to sit well with the fan base, but I also don't necessarily know that it's all that wrong. I mean, the Lions and Packers offensively pretty much had the same output, but it was just when they got to the red zone, the Packers punched it in a couple times and the Lions didn't.
There were kind of a few things that I think were significant issues. The O-line, the pass rush, and like I mentioned earlier with like the conservative offensive approach, just the coaching in general. I think those three things, and we'll get into each of them here in a second. But briefly, I think the pass rush can and will – I think the offensive line can and will improve. You have one guy making his first start, another guy making his third start. Taylor Decker talked about the communication and how they were doing a lot of stunts and pre-snap motion right before the snap, and they were in silent count, so Graham's legs were between his legs, looking to when Goff was ready for the ball, so whatever. First time this series of 5 offensive linemen played together. I think that can improve. I think the coaching can and will improve. What concerns me is about the pass rush where, I have no doubt about Hutch. It was his first game back from major injury. I have no doubt about him this season. If healthy, I really have not many questions about Marcus Davenport. But that interior pass rush, like until Aleem comes back, you really don't have anybody there. And I think that's brutal on third down. You saw it. The Packers converted 4 of their first 5 third downs, a gain of 11, a gain of 16, a gain of 15, and a gain of 26. And it just, I really think they're missing Aleem, they're missing Levi, because you obviously have DJ Reader, who's your nose, and then you have rookie who was slipping, Tyleik Williams. I just don't think he's much of a pass rusher right now. And they say that they can tap into that, and like they said with Aleem, but Aleem tapped into that years
Later
into
on
the
in the
future, not in game one. And I think you saw that.
And Casey Rogers, the Lions defensive line coach, even warned against that the other day. Like, hey, expectations for Tyreek Williams in year one. He's like, well, don't expect a lot of counting stats, which essentially means don't expect him to have a lot of sacks, which essentially means don't expect him to have a big role in the pass rush.
Right.
But I also
be a pocket pusher more than anything.
And at best. And that was really just not what happened today. And you saw the effectiveness of an interior rusher today when Jared Goff was sacked. I can't remember exactly when it was, but Micah Parsons, he moves Panay off his spot out on the edge, and Jared Goff would love to step up on third down and make a quick throw to Sam Laporta over the middle. But guess what? Lucas Van Ness is in his lap because he bull rushed Christian Mahogany, and Goff just had nowhere to go. And we have talked about this over the years, time and time again, with this pass rush. And the fact that you need more than one guy to be able to get home to have an effective pass rush as a whole. And what we saw today, I think I even hesitate to say it was a lot of what we saw in 2023, because by and large, Hutchinson was not in the backfield at all. Some of that was them, going out of their way to take him out of the game and just saying, all right, let's let these other three guys or whatever blitzing linebackers are coming beat us. But he's got to be better. I mean, he simply has to
He's too good.
Show up. Yes. And how many times did we see Micah Parsons get doubled or the Lions try to take him out of the game, and he just went right past him? Like the fourth down sack, they threw it felt like 2-3 guys were blocking him at one point, and he just kept going. And I think he reached 18.3 miles per hour by the time he eventually got to Jared Goff per Next Gen Stats.
Wow.
I think that's the concern for me. Is it's not like Hutchinson was doing his thing, but maybe they weren't getting pressure from the other side. It was none of that was happening, and Hutchinson was almost invisible for most of that game.
And what concerns me as well is, and again, just game one, it's all changed. They got 16 more of these, and then maybe the playoffs. But the talk, and I think a lot of fans and reporters and whatever maybe frustrated or don't see eye to eye with Brad Holmes on the whole defensive end depth discussion. Mm-hmm. It's like, you're relying on Marcus Davenport. He's only played 6 games the past 2 years. But this wasn't that, which I think is almost more concerning. Mm-hmm. This was the starters. This was as healthy as you'll be all offseason. Sans Alim coming back. And it just wasn't working against this Packers offensive line. And I think that is more concerning than if you have to rely on depth, and the depth didn't work.
Yeah. Defensively, a couple other issues. Taron Arnold injured his groin in the second quarter, or on the second drive of the game, and it led to a pretty bad third quarter for him. There was the Packers had a 2-play drive where on the very first play, Jordan Love throws deep to Romeo Doubs. It's DJ Reed and it's Taron Arnold in coverage. They get beat. Very next play, Arnold, with the groin injury that he was talking about, just gets beat on a pick route, and Jaden Reed gets a step on him, and he simply has no chance to recover for it, and it's a Packers touchdown. So I don't know. That's a major cause for concern if Taron Arnold has to miss any time. He says he's going to have an MRI tomorrow. He's not sure about the severity of it, but that's another thing to be concerned about as well, because if your guys aren't able to play that solid press man coverage, and you're ended up having to go with Rocky Sean, who I think is a fine depth option, but all of a sudden, if Arnold has to miss extended time, now Rocky Sean is like an important piece for this defense. I think that's concerning, especially in week 2.
Yeah. This is also 3 leg injuries for Arnold since training camp started. Yep. He had the Lions called it a leg, the first one, and then they called it a hamstring, and then now this one is a groin. That's it's concerning.
Yeah. Where do we go with this offensively? I mean, I got a bunch of stats that the Lions really salvaged negative stat palooza with this touchdown to Isaac Tesla in the final minute, because before that had happened, I'm going to rifle off all the stats I didn't end up using in the game story, but before that happened, they were at risk of losing a 45-game streak without a touchdown in the regular season. They had 11 first downs in the entire game, which would have been their lowest since November 2020. They ultimately end up putting a drive together in the final drive. And another next-gen stats one, and this is including the final drive, 17 or 16 of their 22 carries were the ball carrier got hit behind the line of scrimmage, which is their lowest in the Dan Campbell era. And I think that really speaks to the inconsistency of the offensive line, the overall poor play of the offensive line.
Yeah, absolutely. It was 16 of 22. And, I mean, you saw, I think it was 44 yards on 17 carries for Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery.
Minus 12 rushing yards before contact.
Yeah, 2.2 yards per carry. Just not quite the standard that we've come to expect from them.
As far as the offensive game planning or play calling goes, what were your overall thoughts on that? Because, like we mentioned at the top, Jared Goff was very conservative. And this is – let's say this. This is a very good Packers team.
Yeah.
Right? Like, this is a team that made the trade for Micah Parsons last week or a week and a half ago because they thought that they were one piece away from winning the Super Bowl. And they looked like it out there today. Campbell said after the game that their plan was to kind of, just take what the defense was giving them. They like to play a lot of too high stuff, keep everything in front of them. And, the Lions thought that if they could run the ball and dink and dunk their way, that those things would eventually open up. And they just didn't because the Packers weren't being hurt by them. To your point, they were able to force the Lions into string together these 12, 13, 14, 15 play drives. They had a 16 play drive on their first scoring drive. And by the end of it, I don't think they were gassed or anything like that. But at the end of the day, they just could not get behind the Packers DBs, and that was true in the red zone as well.
It leaves you really, like I mentioned earlier, no room for error. I mean, 14 targets, 14 receptions. They caught every one to Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery of Goff's 39 completions. And I don't know a lot of those were in the first half. Some of them were in the second half. I think the 32-yard catch to Laporta and the 19-yard catch to St. Brown were the only times that I recall off the top of my head of the ball being really pushed down the field before it got out of hand.
Yeah. When it comes to rushing the passer, I got some stats for you here. Not only did the Lions not have a sack today, but they had just 2 quarterback hits. And I thought it was interesting and was the couple of times that they got pressure, I think it was in the third quarter, both passes ended up in the hands of a Lions defender. Yeah. There was the first one where I think it was Hutchinson in his face. It was his quarterback hit, and the ball went right to Alex Anzalone. He blatantly dropped a surefire interception. And then on the very next play, I can't remember who was in there, but forced Jordan Love to make another bad throw that was intercepted by Brian Branch. Unfortunately for the Lions, there was a Rock Ya-Sin penalty, which is another collateral damage from the Arnold injury, butterfly effect and all that. But, yeah.
I mean, what's crazy about the Anzalone one is, the final score of this game was 27-13, and I said walking down, I'm like, that feels generous. Like, it felt like 38 to 13 or whatever. But it just goes to show, like, how much, one play could really change things. It was 16-7 at that point. Anzalone gets his hands on that ball and brings it in.
6.
Right. I mean, they're in the red zone.
Yeah.
And they're right there ready to cut it to a one-possession game. And then the Branch interception was an incredible play by Branch, both the actual interception and the return.
Yeah.
So it's a shame that gets knocked out. But.
And to that point, one of the Packers' touchdown drives came on a 4th down towards the end of the game where the Lions went for it. Goff got sacked on 4th down, turnover on downs deep in their own territory, and the Packers go and punch it in. So how does the score look different if they don't have to do that? If they can just get one stop along the way, or if they can just put points up somewhere along the way. I mean, going into this end of the first half, it was, I believe, 17-3 game. Mm-hmm. Lions are driving. They get to the red zone. You're thinking like, okay, things have been really, really bad.
Right.
But if they can punch it in here, they get the ball to start the third quarter, and you have a chance to go tie it.
Yep.
And you're feeling pretty good about the way that things are shaping up, despite how they played. And then, of course, Jared Goff gets intercepted by Evan Williams. It was a great read by the defender, but it was on the pressure from Parsons. And so I think everything that the Lions lacked today, the pass rush, the solid offensive line play, all of that, it was really interesting because the Packers did it all to a T. They were flawless in those areas for the most part. And, I think that just kind of shows a discrepancy between these two teams right now.
And it was kind of funny that kind of everyone's fears about this team, and the Lions I'm speaking about, did kind of come true in some effect in this game where the young offensive line, you lose Frank Ragnow, it struggled. Mm-hmm. The pass rushers, which I talked about, I think it's a different issue, but the pass rush struggled in general. New coordinators, how can they do it? I'd argue at points they struggled. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say that I know what to do better than either of them. Mm-hmm. But we're talking about those third downs earlier, 4 for 5 on 2 of those. One, Hutch dropped back into coverage on 3rd and 6, and then 3rd and 10, Davenport dropped back into coverage. And if it worked, it would have been shit, Colin Shepard's a genius.
Yeah.
But it didn't work. So, for all the reasons that people were concerned about this team, I think it all popped up on that field today.
Yeah. Anything else?
No, not off the top of my head. Like, dude, what this Isaac Tesla stuff like?
Crazy.
See, at what point do you think? Because Khalif is obviously the starter. Do you think he gets overtaken at some point by Tesla this season?
I mean, I don't even know if he's got to overtake him. Just put him out there a little bit.
Sure.
More, he's incredible during the preseason.
Yeah.
And maybe it's just a matter of them wanting to get him on the same page with Jared Goff.
Of course.
During training camp, Isaac Tesla was mostly running with the second team, which, some days it'd be Kyle Allen, some days it'd be Hendon Hooker. So maybe there's just not a strong enough connection between quarterback and receiver to the point that you feel confident putting him out there with any sort of regularity. But figure it out. Figure it out and get him out there.
Because the talent, the physical talent
fantastic.
is obviously there. I still can't. I just keep replaying that. I mean, that was one of the. That was insane.
Yeah.
It was legitimately insane.
Yeah. Now, looking forward, I think one of the scary things about the way they played today is it doesn't get any easier from here on out. You got Ben Johnson and the Chicago Bears who know you inside and out walking in here next week. And we have no idea how that team is going to look to start the season because they play on Monday night. But I think if the Bears have a good game on Monday night against the Vikings, you're kind of like, okay, this might be a little bit interesting. Ben Johnson might have his way with this team. Then they go to Baltimore the following week for Monday Night Football. They get a little bit of reprieve with the Cleveland Browns at home, but they give the Bengals a run for their money. And then they got to go to Cincy, and then they got to go to Kansas City, and then they come home to play the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It is not going to get any easier. And I think that's the toughest part about this gauntlet schedule is when things aren't working, there's not really a lot of time to figure things out. Like last year where it's like, okay, well, they play the Titans, they play the Jaguars, they're the better team. They're just going to figure it out.
Yeah.
So that's one point. Point number two that I have that I will leave you all with this. This team is still loaded with talent.
Mm-hmm.
And, we'll see how the coordinator situation plays out. I mean, I really do believe that if nothing else, I probably have a little bit more faith in Kelvin Shepard right now to figure things out than John Morton, just because of the fact that he does come from that Aaron Glenn tree. We did see that defense have a really strong training camp, not just against the Lions offense, but in joint practices as well. And I do think that at the end of the day, this team is going to figure it out. I don't think it's time to press the panic button just yet.
Yeah, no, I'm not there either. Talent not quite trumps all, but talent trumps a lot.
Yeah.
And this team has plenty of it. Yeah, I'm not pressing the panic button yet. And to your point about the schedule, you mentioned those 7 games before the bye week. I think the schedule does set up for a tough start and a relatively potential opportunity to be stronger towards the end, which could maybe play right into this team's hands, work out some of the kinks early, and then be able to finish strong. But yeah, we'll have to see. I'm not out, but I am. And if I was 5% concerned before this game, maybe I'm 10% concerned.
Yeah. And I think another thing that's interesting too, we talk about the red zone struggles. I think back to week 2 against Tampa Bay last year, right? Where the Lions end up coming out with this awesome season opening win against the Rams, this high emotion game. They come back home to play Tampa Bay at 1 p.m. the following Sunday, and they look terrible. It was kind of the same exact game. Jared Goff threw it 1 billion times
I think he threw 60 times.
Yeah. And ultimately, they're 0 for 7 in the red zone, and you're like, wow, they didn't really play all that terrible, but they were really bad in this one high leverage area that kind of made the whole product look bad. And, to kind of what happened today, outside of that, there were a few other things. Like in that Tampa Bay game, there was a bad field goal operation. So you're like, oh, well, the coaching, and there's a lot of things that you can pull from these different areas that will make you concerned about the overall direction of things. But at the end of the day, I think if they just get that red zone stuff figured out, and I think the Bears aren't as good as the Packers. At the end of the day, point blank, period. And I think that's going to be, a big help as they try to get back on the track.
I remember Aiden Hutchinson in the locker room after they lost to the Bucs. He was referencing the week 2 game that they had lost the year before that. So that'd be 2023. And he said, fast forward, rewind today, but fast forward then. I after that Bucks game, he was like, yeah, I remember last year when we lost in week 2 and everyone was like, we suck again.
Yeah.
and then they go and rattle off however many games it was until the Bills game. So yeah, not all is lost, but yeah.
Well, and the last 2 seasons, which have been some of the best seasons in Lions history, they've started the season 1-1. So
Yeah.
if they can get back on track 1-1, they kind of got them right where they want them.
Yeah,
So.
yeah, for sure. I mean, even in the first month of last season, up until the Seattle game, the offense wasn't fantastic.
And Dan Campbell even said that, like, after week 3, he's like, there have been some things that, like, we really would like to iron out, and it's not there yet, but I can see him getting there. And I think about week 4, we're going to start clicking, and everything's going to be fine. I think give them the first quarter of the season before hitting the panic button. The only thing that is unfortunate for them is that they play a lot of really good opponents in that span, so maybe they do come out 1-3. But, I mean, the Ravens started terribly last year. Teams start bad. A lot of teams don't get off to hot starts, and that's just the nature of the NFL because there are a lot of good teams. It's different today because they're playing a team that is good, and so expectations were high. These are the 2 teams who are going to be there in the end, probably for the division, and so I think it feels bad, but ultimately it's probably not as bad as it feels.
Should we talk about JMO because that happened?
Yes. Yeah. Jameson Williams. Big news breaking on Saturday night. Signs a 3-year, $83 million contract extension with the Lions. A player who I think we were kind of wondering if he was going to be on the outside looking in as the Lions made these wave of extensions from guys that they drafted. But ultimately, I think the Lions get him at, $27.5 million per year?
0.6, 0.7.
Something along those lines.
The 13th highest paid if he started making that money too.
Yeah, and that will keep him in Detroit through 2029. And I know it sounds like a little bit pricey for a guy who's only had 1 good season, but they clearly believe in this guy. They believe in his trajectory. His explosiveness cannot be denied. I say all the time, like, of any player in the NFL, he is 1 play away from a touchdown more than anybody else in the entire league. And I think they're betting on that. They're betting on him getting better, and they're betting on the fact that if he continues to have the trajectory that they think he's going to, that they won't be able to afford him by this time next year. Fortunately for them, they end up getting the contract done. Everybody's got security on that front, and JMO's here for the next 5 years.
The fact that this year is the 4th year of his contract, and he's small cap hit. Next year is the 5th year option. I forgot off the top of my head. I think it might be like a 15 cap hit or something like that. But the new money doesn't really start until 2027. So that gives, like I said, he's the 13th highest paid right now for talking the average annual value of the new deal. But there's 2 years for other guys to jump that in the meantime, and you're probably going to see that, at least a handful, if not more. So by the time 2027 rolls around, he's probably going to be something like the low 20s, 20, 21st, 22nd highest played receiver in the league. And I think that's kind of what about he is. Mm-hmm. And, you see for a lot of these guys that are that caliber, when they do get paid, you have to almost overpay them. Mm-hmm. But now the fact that money doesn't really hit till 2027, it's like he's going to be properly paid.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, makes it a really great deal.
$27 million in 2027 when this contract starts is like $20 million in today's.
Sure.
Just because of the rising, in terms of cap percentage.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I thought it was a good deal.
Yeah. All right. Thanks so much for listening. Go to DetroitNews.com. We got all sorts of game coverage, morning after coverage, all that good stuff. And don't panic just yet. Everything's going to be fine, maybe.